25 guys, and he did a $500,000 profit deal, and he got started in 2018, 19-ish. Like, you're 5-6 years in, and you're doing 15 deals a year. You're doing multi-million-dollar deals. You're doing $500,000 profits. Like, dude, this is exciting. Like, it doesn't need to be like me and take 10 years to do your first $1 million deal. All right. Welcome, everybody. Excited to be here. Let's see. Where is Hartley? There you are, Hartley. There he is. Hartley,
Hey,
how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Thank you for reaching out to me and sharing with me your success. So, guys, I got this text from Hartley. It says, so Hartley came through the fast track program, and at the fast track, one of the big takeaways you had was where I talked about margin over volume, and you took that to heart. And it said, the reason I like this approach is because it forces you to grow, increase your risk tolerance, and think bigger. I've been working on this for the past 7 years, and last month I sold my biggest flip to date. It was a spec home that I built in Idaho. The total project cost was about $950,000, and I sold the home for $1.61 million and made just shy of $500,000 in profit. Without your mentorship, I never would have known this was possible. Thank you for inspiring me and showing me a vision of what is achievable in my life and business. And then here's this property in Idaho. Where's this at? Victor, Idaho?
Yeah, Victor, it's just about 30 minutes west of Jackson.
Okay. So love that story, and I'm so happy for you, Hartley. And I wanted to take this time for you to share with everybody about this deal and maybe walk us through start to finish. You've been now in the game for a minute, and you're working at it every day, building the business, which is very exciting. So let's talk about your transformation. Like, this was a $1.6 million home. It was a spec flip, which means you bought a lot, built a house, sold it, made a $500,000 profit on one deal. I mean, how many tiny flips would you have to do to make that what you made on one deal? And that's the idea around this. So tell us a little bit about that, Hartley. What was your transformation like to get from where you started to then this deal?
Well, I'll try to keep it short, but essentially I started in 2018 flipping my first house. Me and my brother, we partnered together, put all our money into it, bought it for 90. We put another 45 into it, ended up selling it for 225 in mid 2019. I thought, wow, this job sucks. I'm only making 40. I've only made, my brother and I both walked away with about $42,000 a piece. I'm like, I just traded my current job for another job that even it took about almost a year in total from because we did all the work ourselves. So I knew that I had to learn from the best. So I reached out. That's when I started following your content and joined the fast track in November of 2019. I came out to Scottsdale or Phoenix, that area when you were located over here. Which, by the way, I'm currently in Queen Creek, Arizona now. So,
oh, cool. Okay.
So I started I'm from Hilton Head, South Carolina. I've moved all over since for the last 7 years, but yeah, now I'm in Arizona. But pretty much, so from then on, I was like, I want to scale. I need to grow this into a real legitimate business. I can't just be doing all the work myself. So, obviously, learned how to underwrite deals a lot better, going through the fast track program. Learned how to market better. And so I was doing for the next probably 3 years, I averaged between only probably 10 and 15 flips a year. I wasn't doing much wholesaling just because I was in a smaller market. I mean, there's only about 150,000 people in the county that I was in South Carolina. But I slowly, because my market was so small, I was like, I need to increase my income, so I need to increase my deal size.
Yeah.
So Hilton Head, South Carolina has a great luxury market, a lot of tourism there. So I went from essentially $200,000 to $300,000 price point, and just steadily grew in price point increments, and to the point where, I mean, I've bought and renovated 1.2, $1.5 million renovations, but none of them have profited like this spec home in Idaho.
And how long did it take you to work your way up to the $1 million price point? How long would you say?
I did that at my first over $1 million price point in 2021.
Pretty quick then.
So from 2019 to 2021, I really, I tried hard to go up in price point.
Okay, so Hartley, I don't know if you know this, but that you are way smarter than me because you did it in about 2 years, what took me about 10 years.
Well, it helps.
Seriously, I was flipping and I was working my way up, but I don't think I got to my first $1 million property until about 10 years into the game.
Well, it
Um,
helps when you show me the vision,
yeah.
because my favorite videos and content that you put out is about your luxury spec homes in
Mm,
Scottsdale, and I see you're now starting to do stuff in Puerto Rico, and it's attractive to me.
mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second. Oftentimes we think that the way that I'm going to grow in the business is do more deals. Like we naturally just go there. We think, okay, if I'm doing 5 deals, if I could do 10 deals, well, that I can double my revenue. And that certainly is true. The problem though is as you increase volume, you also pick up overhead, you introduce a whole lot of stress and anxiety to your life because now you're transacting a lot more and it's not always the right solution. There are people that do just as many deals. Like let's just take wholesaling, for example. They do the same amount of deals wholesaling, but they're doing $3 million a year and someone else is doing 500,000 a year, same number of deals. Why? Because one averages $10,000 a deal. The other one averages $40,000 a deal. So there's a huge difference between volume and margin. Now, if you graduate to the flipping arena, like Hartley does, and you move into flipping, that is the ultimate business model where margin over volume is just so much better. I mean, higher end homes, they're more fun to do. You can have legit contractors, you can have a real budget. You know what I mean? Like you're not trying to save a toilet seat like you do on a $150,000 rehab because you bought right, you budget right, you're doing a higher end type of project, and then you're getting much bigger percentages. So just to put this in perspective, let's say that you're following the typical fix and flip formula, 70%, and you do a $200,000 ARV. Well, 15% of 200,000 is a $30,000 profit. Okay. Let's take the same 15% on a $600,000 house. Now you're making 90,000. 200,000, 15% profit margin, you make 30, 600,000, you make 90. It's the same work to do a $200,000 ARV as a 600,000 ARV. It's the same freaking work. You got to buy it, close on it. You got to hire contractors, right? You got to find a buyer. You got to resell it. Same thing. A little bit more capital. Maybe you're going to rehab it a little differently, but it's the same thing. Same time, energy, and effort, but 3 times the profit. And that continues as you go up in price point.
Another thing, just to piggyback off that, I'd even argue that it's a little bit easier in a higher price point, just because I don't have to worry about deal flow as much as I do at a lower price point. You really got to keep your pipeline full if you're gonna just hit $40,000 to $60,000 profits on smaller flips. Where I can just do a handful, and I got 2 more going on right now, and that's enough, and that's enough to keep me happy for right now.
Yeah, not only that, but I also would say that the higher up in price point, the less competition.
Right, right.
Because I would say 80% of flippers are like under 400,000 price point. As you start to go up, the percentage of competition goes down. So when you're buying something for, 600, you're putting 200 into it, you're all in for 8, selling for 1.5 or whatever, 1.4. There aren't very many people that are taking on those deals. So your ability to acquire that discounted property at the higher price points is also a whole lot better. So everything all around just goes better as you go up. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to take on massive rehabs. Like sometimes it does. I've done several projects where their $1 million is my rehab budget, right? Like I'm spending $1 million on the rehab. Now I'm swinging big. Like I'm going for $1 million profit on those deals. If I'm going to spend $1 million, I better make $1 million. So I do those deals, and those are full redesigns. Like you're putting in, headers and all these crazy things, building another garage, whatever. You can still swing pretty big with cosmetic. So like I've got a flip right now, Hartley, where I bought it for 5, I put 100 in, so I'm all in for 6, selling it for 8.25. And
Wow.
I'll by the time I'm done, I'll make 150, 160, and it was a 30-day rehab. So to
Right.
me, that's a cosmetic, that's a very quick flip. but I'm making 150. I'm making a good 6-figure swing on that baby. And it's a in and out type of flip. Why? Because I'm flipping at 800, not 200.
Right.
That's why. Other than that, it's no different. Like I did the same type of rehab I would on a $200,000 house, but instead of making 30, I'm making 150. Same thing.
Right. I was hoping to ask you a little bit about the financing side of those larger deals, because one of the biggest obstacles is finding capital for a large deal. It's very to banks and institutional lenders, spec homes are pretty risky. In
Yeah.
fact, I wasn't able to even. I've been working with a couple different hard money lenders for years on smaller flips. But when I came out to Idaho, where it's much more remote and a smaller market. They just weren't willing to lend at that price point. So I had to go out and find the capital elsewhere. But I'm just curious, is that the same? Is that your experience?
Yeah. So what I do on my big deals, there's two different things I'll do. If I want to keep it straight debt, then I'll combine hard money and private money. So I get to still 100% funded.
Right.
But as I start to cross over $1 million properties, I start to think about an equity partner instead of a debt lender. And the way I do equity is, hey, you come in, you fund the entire project. I'm not putting a dime of my money in. I'm not making payments on anything, and we'll split profit 50-50 on the back end.
Right.
Now, again, if I compare the two between just a debt versus equity on the financing, maybe I would come out higher with the debt, but I like removing all of the stress of the carrying cost.
It is a lot of stress. Yeah. That's a good you got to kind of weigh it out, the balance between debt versus equity. A lot less stress going the equity route. So I mean, as I continue to try to, I've got, like I said, I got two more going on right now. They're currently all debt. But it is something, I got an interest clock ticking in my head, in the back of my
Yes.
mind. So
What I don't like about that, Hartley, is when you have debt and you've got that big payment juicing every month, it puts a lot of pressure on. And then what you do is you tend to be impatient and you tend to hurry it a little too much. And you start dropping the price because you want to get it sold and you're not patient and you end up leaving money on the table. I don't like that. I don't like that approach. But so here's one thing that I like. I recently did a deal where I got my first position lender at 600,000. I borrowed private money. I needed another 300,000 to finish the project, right? So I needed 900 total. I got 600 from hard money, 300 from private. Well, my hard money for 600,000 was at 12%. So that's 72,000 a year. So that's 6,000 a month was my payment. Okay. So 6,000, and I knew I was going to be in the deal about 12 months because it was what it was I bought a partially finished new construction. It was at like drywall, so I had to finish it.
yeah.
So I knew I was going to be in it a year. I'm going to be paying 72,000 in interest, and I needed 300 from private money. So what I did is I overfunded my PML and I borrowed 400, and I took the other 100 and I set it aside to pay my carrying cost. So I call this finance your financing. I literally financed my financing.
Smart, very smart.
And now I put that aside. Now I escrowed over here, basically my payments to my hard money lender. And I made the payments from the money I borrowed on the PML side. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. Yeah, I like that.
And that took the pressure off by doing that. It took the pressure off because now I have the money set aside for a year to make payments.
And so now you probably are just on the equity side, or do you still kind of over the $1 million price point? Are you still?
I go back and forth, but I like the equity side because I just don't like juicing those payments, $10,000 a month payment on your big projects.
Well, that's probably the direction I figured I'd be headed in anyways. Yeah. I mean, that creates you must have a very trusting relationship with whoever that other partner is, though.
Well, when you're bringing in big dollar numbers like that, those type of investors, they usually prefer equity anyway. They're willing to swing with you. The downside to equity is, they share in profits, but they also share in losses, or they share in smaller profits. So like if you don't win big, then they don't make as much. It all depends on the investor. But what I find is when I'm asking somebody to bring $1 million to the table or $2 million to the table on a deal, then oftentimes they want to talk about equity anyway.
Would you ever, are you doing this just deal by deal, or do you have, okay.
Yep. Deal by deal. But you need to start having conversations with somebody with deep pockets, and you need to start showing them some of your previous deals
Yeah.
and you start dangling equity in front of them on your turns, like you're showing them you made 500 and they're going to want to come in and they're going to want to fund your deals. And again, I'd rather be splitting profits with my investor that's funding 100%. The only caveat to that is they have to be hands off. If they want to get in the trenches with you, it'll be a nightmare. I did that once where they wanted to be involved in all the decision making, and it just slowed the whole thing down. Their advice was bad anyway, like their taste was bad, and it was a hassle, but they were funding it, so I had to deal with it.
Right.
So now I set up really clear expectations. Hey, you got to let me do my thing. You cannot get involved in the daily operations. We know what we're doing. You got to stay on the sidelines.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. Instead of having a million or $2 million in debt, depending on how many projects you're doing at one time, and having an interest clock ticking, now I can do 3 or 4 maybe with a partner, equity partner, make less per deal. Maybe it takes a little bit longer per deal, but it's pretty stress free.
Yeah.
No paperwork to get, not much paperwork to go through, like hard money and other
Yeah.
institutions.
I mean, if you can swing the debt service, then swing the debt service. But it starts to weigh on you. To me, that's one of the biggest things with the luxury flipping is just that debt service every month.
So when you used to, or do you still get money from banks still in the million plus price points like here in Paradise Valley? I don't know if you still have deals going on over here, new construction ones. I know in the
Yeah.
past, I remember you mentioning that sometimes you would buy the
Yeah.
lot cash, finance the construction with a bank. Do you still do that?
Yeah. Yep. I like that. You have to be bankable, which means you have to have a fat tax return, which means you can't write off everything and show no income. So for me, like a lot of my buddies, make millions of dollars a year and don't pay taxes because they write off everything.
Right.
Well, that's a double-edged sword. So you don't pay taxes, but you're also not financeable. A lender wants to see you producing cash. So I strategically paid the high tax, showed the high income so that I could go get the bank financing. I went through the brain damage of getting underwritten and qualified, but then now I can get some of that cheaper money at at the time it was, when I first started, it was 4%. Now it's a little higher, but it's still pretty cheap money. It is still a little tricky because I got to do draws and inspections and all of that, but you're saving a lot of money on the finance side by doing that.
Right.
So I think it's worth it. If your long game is to do luxury, then I would try to tap into a local bank, build a relationship, start doing some deals with them and start building out that connection with some banks.
Absolutely. I think it never hurts to have that in your back pocket, but I definitely would rather the approach of having just a partner, an equity partner.
Yeah, Mary asked a great question in the chat. What do you prefer, renovations or spec? Spec all day long. Specs. Because here's the thing, when we spec a home, everything's new construction, everything's brand new. There are very few changes unless we make changes, which we do sometimes, but we get a full set of architectural plans. We call it is we take it to bid, which means now we shop it out. We get 3 bids on every single trade. They're going to look at blueprints. They're going to give you a concrete number for electrical, plumbing, mechanical, framing, all the things. I now plug all of that into my budget. I know exactly what it's going to cost me to build. Again, unless I change something, but now I have solid numbers that don't change. Rehabbing, we go in at $1 million and we spend 1.5 million because we're tearing into some house, right? So it's nearly impossible to keep your budgets, and your cost overruns, your time frames, all the things are really hard with rehabbing. And that's any rehab, but that's especially true on luxury. So if I'm going to do a luxury flip, like $1 million rehab, I better be winning massive. Like that thing better be a $1 million profit, or I'm not touching it. Make sense? I hope that answered your question, Mary. Yeah. So Hartley, this is really exciting, guys. Leave a comment in the chat and say, Hartley, you're a flipping genius. I mean, one deal, $500,000. I mean, there's nothing gets better than that. I mean, that's a beautiful thing. So Hartley, what's next for you? Where are you hoping to take this?
Well, now I've got 2 that I'm working on. Maybe just continue to grow that.
Yeah.
I've got a good relationship with a good general contractor in that valley. And he sees the vision for what I have up there, just to continue the spec homes, but I would like to possibly even get into development of multifamily in that area. I think if this is specific to that area, I'm sure a lot of other remote higher income towns are like this, where contractors are limited. I'm sure up in like Kalispell, right, in Montana, there's
Oh,
contractors
nearly
are limited.
impossible. Yeah.
So really, if you have the labor, you're winning. If you're out of state and you're coming here to build a custom home, the markups on the subcontractors and the general contractors are essentially what what I'm currently making on a spec home. So they're not going to leave any money on the table for anyone looking to build a custom home for themselves.
Yeah, that labor relationship is huge. What on your 1.6 flip, do you remember what was your per foot on the build?
About 275.
Okay, that's great. That's really good. Yeah, so in our luxuries where we're at the 5 million price point and up, we're at 350 a foot. So 270 for a 1.6 is great. Like that's awesome. But that's really controlling your labor. I mean, that's hands-on. That is going to be getting lots of bids. You've got to have a handle on your contract labor to keep it at 270. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure, and it has a lot to do with the actual market itself. Because I'm sure in like Paradise Valley or Puerto Rico, where there's a lot more competition, a lot more just buyer pool, more people living in the area, it's just a higher price. It's a higher price point. So I don't know. I think that being in a remote market, I'd say it's much harder to pull that labor first off.
Yeah.
But no,
Just controlling that cost of labor is everything. Do you get a lot of bids? How do you handle your bid process?
Well, I have a good general contractor that pretty much just bids it out, price checks.
Okay.
A lot of the framing, a lot of the structural stuff he has in house. He has crews for, but a lot of the trades, mechanicals, concrete, he's gonna bid out and just price check his. He's got his routine subcontractors that he works with, but he's gonna price check them every so often.
So here's what I would recommend to you, Hartley. I would recommend you do the same thing I did. Once I got to 3 luxuries in one market at a time, now various stages, but 3 at a time, you're ready to transition from builder / GC to supervisor foreman, because one full-time supervisor can do about 3 projects at a time in the same market. So he'll bounce around. Now, you're going to payroll that guy for 120 grand a year. You're going to give him a pickup truck and some benefits. But now you're spending 120,000 on oversight, and he's on site every day. So he's running that job tight. He's GCing it, but you payrolled him now. Now, the other thing we do is when I'm at the 3 at a time phase, is I also hire a full-time bid coordinator. And I pay typically 50 grand, somewhere around there a year. And his job is get bids all day long, every day. We get 3 to 6 bids on everything. And that's all he does. Get bids, get bids, get bids. We then pick our contractor, and then our supervisor now manages the projects, and you're out of the day-to-day now. And again, you are saving so much money doing that, because now you're finding the labor at the cheapest price because there's no markup. And you have a full-time supervisor payrolled that's doing, so his 120 salary is only costing you 40 per project.
Right.
So your supervision goes to 40 per project because it's spread out annually over 3. And we add it as a line item on our construction budget, and that's built into our financing. So I finance my supervisor.
That's smart. That's smart.
Because you can draw from it. You can draw on supervision. Like, let's say you get a bank loan or PML or hard money. We have a line item called supervision, call it $40,000. And then as I draw on the project, I draw to pay my supervisor. So I'm not even paying for my supervisor. He's built into the formula.
What about on the design side? How does that integrate? You have one person that's just selecting materials and sourcing, because that's a lot of work right there. My wife and I currently is sourcing all the materials, because selections, we're not just trying to build just a vanilla spec home, just like yours. It's something you want to walk in there and say, oh, they put some thought into this.
Here's a trick I do. I'll go to LA or Paradise Valley or somewhere where they have 10, 15, $20 million specs. Now they got to be specs. I don't want custom, because who knows what the heck they did. That's weird. I want specs. Now, when I go to LA and I look at a spec for sale for $20 million, I guarantee you they paid 100 grand for a designer to pick their selections. Then what I do is I take that Zillow link, I send that to my designer, and I say, I want the same lighting package. I want the same finishes. as you see in this $20 million home, but I want it on a budget. So now what they do is they go to the electrical store and whatever, but they're finding that same chandelier that on that LA house is a $5,000 light, and I want to spend $500, and I find something that looks just like it, but it's a knockoff.
Right.
Now it still fits in a $1.5, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million home, but I didn't come up with the idea. I stole it from a spec builder doing a $20 million home.
Right.
But then I get a designer and I say, this is what I want it to look like. Go find this stuff. My budget for electrical is 50,000 or whatever your electrical package is. And then they go find the materials and that's what I don't give the designer too much free reign. I want to control that because designers like to be creative and they'll come up with some weird stuff, and it needs to be custom, but it also needs to be vanilla enough to fit the market to appeal to a general population, but also still have some cool, unique things, but not too unique. You got to balance that very carefully.
So you're setting eyes on that. You control that, oversee that 100%. At the end of the day, you're signing off on that.
I just don't want to be the one that's looking through the electrical store to find the light fixture, because
Right.
that's time consuming.
So what do you pay someone like a designer like that that's just sourcing materials?
We might have a $5,000 or $10,000 budget for all selections, and they do
Okay.
all the selections, everything. But I got to give them a lot of direction, and then once they source it all, then we order it directly, right? So we're not
Right.
getting I try to avoid getting all the markups everywhere I can.
Right.
Because if it's touching somebody else, all your stuff's getting marked up, and you'll pay 10%, 20% more on everything.
Right.
And that's what your GC's doing, by the way.
Oh yeah, I know. I know. It's currently, it seems like a win-win, but I definitely would like to have more control.
I'll bet you if you went direct on everything on that 270 a foot, you probably get that down to 225 a foot.
Possibly, yeah. So you have a superintendent, you got someone doing selections. So who's pulling the permit?
So my super has a
licensed?
license. He's licensed. I make sure,
Okay.
the best guy is someone who's 28. He's got a college degree. He's got a builder's license, and
Right.
he's working for like a home builder making 80 grand a year. And I hire him
Right.
away and he takes my projects,
Right.
He's got 7-8 years experience, so he knows what he's doing. And then what I do, Hartley, this is genius. I wait until I can see the finish line. So I don't do it too early, but when I'm about 6 months from completion, I dangle a bonus in front of them. And I say, look, if you can complete this project by X date and stay on budget and quality's got to be there, I'll pay you a $10,000 bonus.
Right.
Now he's amped up.
That's smart. So going into a new market, because one of the obstacles going into a new market in a Teton Valley and Victor was it's very small. Like there's 15,000 people in this whole county. The next closest larger town is Idaho Falls or Jackson, and you're not going to pull labor from Jackson because they're the billionaires. They command the labor. But so if you're pulling from other locations, Idaho Falls, is that the only, I guess, issue I could see with hiring someone that's a little newer, I guess, is the relationship aspect. Can they have, I know they can, you have someone going out and getting bids, but essentially, will they take them seriously? Because a lot of times in contracting work, it's relationship based, right? A lot of these guys there's no professional side of their business. It's all just more of that blue collar mindset where it's just who you know. Oh, I'm gonna pick up a job for Scott because oh, I know he builds X amount of houses this year, so I'm only gonna work for Scott.
Well, that's why in the beginning, you're literally going to be getting 6 bids, and you're going to have contractors that won't bid you. They don't know you. They don't like you. They're busy with their guy, but you just go through it because in time you'll start to win them over. You'll start to get your core group of contractors that are your go-tos.
Right.
Now I want to keep everybody honest. So we always bid everybody, because otherwise the prices start to creep up because they think they can. So I call it keep them honest, which means I'm rebidding you on every job. Even though you're awesome and I like you, you still got to bid it and you still got to be competitive.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, that's challenging because, you might be the new guy in town and nobody trusts you or knows you, but just go through it. Know that you're going to work 10 times harder to get your labor in place, but just know the next one's going to be easier. The next one's going to be easier. And pretty soon people know you around town as someone that does, 3 to 5 specs a year, and you'll start commanding respect.
Right.
All of it takes time. I'm running through that right now. In Puerto Rico, I'm doing a $7 million spec, and I couldn't get anybody to give me the time or day because they're like, who the heck are you? So it just means that like I got to go through a lot of bids, because what happens is I get the gringo pricing. Now you'll get the same thing. You're the new guy, so you're gonna get the higher price.
Right.
In fact, here's a cool hack I did. There's a Puerto Rican spec builder. He's Puerto Rican and he's in my market. Like he's doing deals right where I'm doing deals. His name is Luis Ramos. Cool guy. This guy can get I don't know how he gets the pricing. Well, I know how. He's been around forever and everyone likes him. And he can get stuff so much cheaper than I can get it. So here's what I do. I call him up and I say, hey, I'll pay you if you can get my window package at your pricing, because I can't get it at your pricing. And he's like, yeah, I get it done for that. And I'll pay him some money, and he'll call his window guy and get it at the price I wanted, his price for me. But they don't want to give me that price because I'm the new guy, and they just think they can get more because I'm the gringo or I'm the new guy. So anyway, you just work around it. The other hack strategy to get good pricing from your contractors is you pay them freaking fast. That's what every contractor wants. They want to get paid fast. So I do not string them along. I make sure I pay them very quickly. Like when you're done, I'm writing the check. Come to work. Give me a good price. I'll write the check when you're done.
Do you pay them on their terms, how they want to get paid, or do you always set a standard? You're like, you'll always, like my title company will issue you a check every time you submit an invoice.
It's just if I got to do a draw and I got to submit an invoice to the funding source and I got to get an inspection, I'm going to be paying way more in contract labor. So what I try to do is I try to figure out how to pay the contractor immediately, then submit for a reimbursement draw.
Okay.
So set some money aside, pay that freaking contractor the minute they're done. That's how you get good pricing.
Got it.
Because most contractors barely have gas money to show up to the job. I mean,
right.
They're broke and they don't manage their finances, but they're good.
Right.
There's three types of contractors. Contractors that are really good at what they do and they have good financing so they can carry the project, buy their materials, invoice you, wait to get paid. Contractors like that. There's contractors that are really good at what they do, but broke as hell. And they don't know how to manage their books. They don't know how to manage their finances. They need you to buy the materials and they need you to pay them tight draws. As soon as they're done doing something, they need paid, right? And so what I find is the well-financed contractors charge a whole lot more. The broke as hell contractors are cheap, and that's why they can't manage their finances. They're probably not charging enough.
Like a motivated seller.
So then your work doubles because you got to be right on top of them. You got to be careful. You don't want to pay them before something's done. They're going to try that. They're going to ask for money before they get it. All those games. But if you're on it, then you can pay them tight, pay them quickly, but get the cheap pricing.
So do you have superintendents in each market, or do you have the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be market specific. That's why it's hard to bounce around. You want to really build team in a market and be very market specific with luxury. Yeah. You never want to be one and done. You want to set, because it takes time to set up a team, set up the market, get your head around what you're doing there. This turned in like a masterclass on like luxury flipping, but this is honestly, Hartley, I don't get to have these conversations very often because most people, they're like trying to do their first deal, not doing $500,000 profit deals like you are. But guys, I hope this is inspiring. Hartley, how old are you?
25.
You're 25, guys, and he did a $500,000 profit deal, and he got started in 2018, 19-ish. Like you're 5-6 years in, and you're doing 15 deals a year. You're doing multi-million-dollar deals. You're doing $500,000 profits. Like, dude, this is exciting. Like it doesn't need to be like me and take 10 years to do your first $1 million deal. You don't have to wait that long. You could get there faster.
Well, it's a lot easier when you can kind of, when I can see the vision that you kind of laid out. I mean, you laid the groundwork for this. I mean, seeing a lot of I love this content you put out on your spec homes in Paradise Valley and Puerto Rico too. I'm excited to see those as well as they come along.
Well, I'll do more just for you because I know you'll watch it.
Please do.
Awesome. Well, keep up the good work. Think really about getting to that 3 a year, because that's when you can really start to carry the overhead, bring on payroll. You know what I mean? And it makes sense now. And it doesn't make sense when you're doing one. Just keep the GC contract, 1099 contract labor it all out, pay a little bit more, but you don't have to, because now you don't have enough work to bring it in-house. Once you're at that 3 a year, you can bring it in-house.
What would you say? Sense? Yeah. My last question, because I know I'm running out here. So what about competition? Would you ever say, you said you have a competitor who sounds like you have a good relationship with, though, right in your market? Because Teton County, Idaho, it's a very small market. most everybody knows each other. There's only a handful of custom home builders. One guy in particular that is also building spec homes in addition to custom homes.
Yeah.
Would you ever say that you ever look at the market and say, oh, this is over, there's too many spec homes on the market. There's too many.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've left markets because of that very reason. Where I thought you were going to go was how do you understand your competition? And my goal is to be number two, not number one, number two, because I want number one to establish the market and then I copy what he does.
Well, I think I know who my number one is. He definitely has the labor pool. I've tried, I've gotten a lot of my guy's gotten a lot of contractors from his jobs, just riding around to his jobs. But yeah, I do wonder, being in such a small county in a small market, if there's ever going to be a surplus of inventory.
I mean, you definitely want to be looking at that. You want to make sure your margins are big swings. You want to make sure that inventory is moving at that price point. And you also want to be in a big enough playground to keep growing. So
Right.
the reason why, so I was in St. George, Utah, Southern Utah, and I was at the $1 million price point and I got up to maybe $2 million. And then I was about tapped out in that market at the time. Now it's higher now, but at the time there wasn't really speccing over that price point. And I wanted to keep going up. So, and competition started getting really bad. Like it was just too many builders, too much margins were starting to slip. So I strategically left Southern Utah and went to Scottsdale, Arizona. And when I went to Scottsdale, Arizona, entry was 3 million
Wow.
on the luxury side. So I now entered a new playground and it was awesome because I mean, now you can do $20 million specs there. And so I'm entry level at 3 to 5 in that market. So I got all the room in the world to keep growing and going up.
Right.
Same with Puerto Rico. There's not a lot of them, but there's a couple neighborhoods that are $20-30 million neighborhoods.
Wow.
So, there's no ceiling on where I can take it if I want.
Right.
So I don't like that. I don't want to be in a market where top of the market's 1.5 and that's as high as I can go.
Right.
And I don't want to be the first one to introduce a $3 million home. Let your competition do that. If he wins big, then you can copy him.
Right.
Right. I love a comment. It says, good artists copy, great artists steal. Right. So I steal my competitor's blueprint, and meaning I let them prove it. And then what I want to do is I want to do what they did, but better.
Right.
It's better cost. Where can I improve on what they did? But they proved it works. Now I'm going to copy them.
I love it. I appreciate the insight.
Okay, guys, I got to run to another appointment, but awesome call. Sorry we didn't get to some more Q&A, but I thought we did really good on this and love this conversation. More than anything, guys, I hope you catch a bigger vision seeing what Hartley's doing and really can say, man, I got to start thinking bigger. I got to have a better vision for myself. I can go bigger with this. I can do more with this. But again, it's all stepping stones, right? It's all developmental. Start where you are, build on that, and then just keep moving up. And Hartley, you're a flipping genius, man. So glad to have connected with you again and have you on here.
Absolutely, Jerry. Love you, man. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Yep. Take care, everybody. We'll see you on the next call.